Link sat on the marble steps leading up to the Temple of Time. The sun warmed the stones beneath him, and a fresh breeze rustled the trees surrounding this tranquil place in the middle of Castletown. Birds chirped cheerfully while strains of music and the happy bustle of business drifted towards him from the marketplace. Ganondorf was no more. Evil had been erased. But so had the last of Link's happiness. He sat there, staring at his feet, wondering if he could ever find a reason to move. Maybe he would simply sit here forever, frozen in time. That would be a fitting end for the hero of time, wouldn't it? An everlasting human statue before the doors of the temple, a constant warning to those who thought to meddle with things beyond their understanding. Zelda had tried to cheer him up. She assured him he'd done the right thing. It was the only way to save Hyrule. But the princess, for all her wisdom, could never understand. Even in her darkest moments, she always had someone by her side. Impa, at the very least, had always been there for her. She didn't know what it was to be alone, to look ahead to the long years stretching ahead of her, and know with a cold, heavy certainty that she always would be alone. How foolish he thought to think that he'd be saved from that fate. For those precious few weeks, months, years, but what was time to him? He had to put aside the pain of his early days, but he should have realized it was his destiny to be alone. It all made sense, of course. Zelda had explained every maddening detail of her sound logic. The only way they could truly prevent Ganondorf's evil from tainting Hyrule, without causing an endless loop in which the same events repeated themselves ceaselessly, was to destroy Ganondorf before he could become powerful. She had insisted on returning to their rightful time once the task was complete, trying to reassure him by saying he could have the childhood he missed. But what she failed to understand was that he couldn't just go and live with the Kokiri again, not now that he knew what he was. He didn't belong there anymore, but he didn't belong anywhere else either. The only ones who remembered what happened before they turned time back on itself were him and the 7 sages. After replacing the Master Sword, he hadn't been able to leave the quiet sanctuary of the temple. Link knew that if he ventured into town, he would come face to face with his old friends. They were nothing but familiar strangers. He knew everything about them, but they wouldn't recognize him at all. If he ventured into the marketplace, he would see those 2 brothers standing in the shade of a tree, laughing in each other's faces and getting no work done. The fat lady in the blue dress would boast to everyone who stood still long enough that her dog was the most beautiful creature in Hyrule. The young lovers would stand by the fountain in the middle of the square, like they were in their own world. The orphan would sit in the corner, begging rupees and old junk from passers-by. The vendors would yell over each other, trying to gather the most people to their stalls. The royal guards would chase a thief or 2 down the back alleys. Maybe Malon and Talon would be there, selling their famous milk and buying feed for their horses. Link pressed the heels of his hands against his closed eyes until stars exploded against his eyelids. Talon's eyes would pass right over him without the slightest trace of recognition. Malon? Maybe she would smile brightly at him, wave a little, remark on his green clothes, but she wouldn't know him, and she wouldn't call him Fairy Boy. Link shot to his feet and started walking as fast as he could, without running. He pulled out his wallet and quickly counted the gems inside. 56 rupees would have been enough for supplies and some kind of short sword. His fingers itched for the familiar weight of the Master Sword, but it needed to remain in its rightful place. Besides, he wouldn't even be able to hold it upright in his small body. A shame he had to get rid of all his weapons and items, most of which had been some kind of heirloom. He would need protection if he was to go all the way to the forest. Link went to the forest seeking Solace. He told himself he was being stupid every step of the way, but nothing could stop him. His strength was courage, so even though he feared what he would find there, his steps forward never faltered. But it wasn't just stupidity or bravery that pushed him onward despite every reason to stay away. He was desperate. The Kokiri hid from him at first, but once they saw that he was a boy dressed just like them, their curiosity got the better of them. As he walked through the familiar clearing where he'd grown up, he slowly attracted a trailing line of inquisitive fairies and wide-eyed boys and girls waiting to see who he was and what he would do. The only time he stopped was when he passed his own house. There was no ladder leading up to the hole in the tree's trunk. No curtains waved in the warm breeze. The space near the roots where he and Saria had carved pictures was blank. No one lived there. There wasn't even a path leading up to the tree. Turning to continue on his way, Link realized that the Kokiri were shrinking away from him, watching him warily as they're waiting for him to sprout fangs and leap at them. Then he remembered the long knife strapped to his back, a poor replacement for his trusty sword, but more deadly than anything these innocent children had ever seen. He smiled at them, hoping they would understand he was friendly. But the sight of their familiar nervous faces and their fairies bobbing overhead were just too painful. He turned away again. Of course, he should have known that one Kokiri would be bold and brash enough to face him. It made sense that his fairy was green, his feet firmly planted on the path leading to the great Deku tree. Mido drew himself up to his full height and glared at the intruder.
"Look, kid," he said, crossing his arms. "I'm the boss here, so you have to listen to what I say. And I say turn around and go back the way you came from. You're not supposed to be here, and there's no way I'm going to let you hurt the great Deku tree."
Link couldn't suppress a slight smirk. How had Mido ever given him any trouble? At the same time, he felt an unexpected twinge as Mido glared at him, with none of the built-up resentment he was used to. This Mido didn't know him, didn't hate him. He was just as wary and curious as the others, though he was trying not to show it.
"So you're the great Mido of the Kokiri, huh?"
The smirk turned into a genuine smile.
"I've heard about you."
Mido's jaw dropped.
"You have? Of course you have."
His chest puffed out, proudly as he adjusted his green cap.
"You've got a lot of responsibility leading the Kokiri," Link said,
knowing exactly what Mido wanted to hear most.
"I can see why the great Deku tree would have chosen you to be their guardian."
Mido's eyes popped, and he forgot to look like he already knew what Link was talking about.
"Wait, did he say that? The guardian of the Kokiri? Of course, being a leader means being a guardian. You want to protect them from harm, don't you?"
Mido's beady eyes flicked around the crowd of Kokiri gathered around them, listening with great interest.
Yeah, of course I do."
Link unbuckled the strap across his chest. When Link pulled the long knife out of its sheath, all the Kokiri gasped and took an involuntary step back. Mido jumped, but he didn't back away. His fairy fluttered closer to inspect the sharp edge of the blade. Sliding the knife back into the sheath, Link held it out to Mido.
"Take it. Use it to protect everything good and green in this forest."
Awestruck and speechless, Mido took the blade reverently from him. Link began to walk past him, but finally Mido found his voice again and whirled to face him.
"Oi! Who are you?"
Link smiled at the boy who had once been his rival. He hadn't understood it growing up, but now he could see that all Mido had ever wanted was to be respected, to be given attention and responsibility so he could prove himself. The eyes that had glittered with such envy when Link had appeared with a sword and shield now shone with admiration and gratitude. Maybe this time they could actually be friends.
"My name is Link."
Standing in the middle of the glade, staring up into the rustling boughs of the great Deku tree, Link could almost believe he was back where all of this had started, before he'd known about Ganondorf, or the Triforce, or his destiny. "Thou art not of this forest, young child," the voice rumbled through the ground, sprouted into the air, and blew towards him like a warm breeze. It had been so long since he heard the great Deku tree in his prime that for a moment, Link couldn't find the breath to speak. Finally, he said, "I am Hylian. I've come seeking your help, if you will." "Ah," the great Deku tree breathed, every leaf rustling. "Saria has told me of thy coming. What is thy request?" Link's heart ached at the mention of his old friend, but there would be time to visit her in the future. "I would like to talk to Navi, the fairy." The tree's roots groaned, and though questing out into the soil to understand Link's purpose in coming here, "I shall grant thy request." And in only moments, a little blue fairy flew into the clearing on tinkling wings.
"Here I am, great Deku tree,"
she said in her cheerful little voice. "Navi!" The sight of her, flying along, so vibrant and alive, cut through the last shreds of his numbness and grief. and he slumped to his knees. He couldn't take his eyes off her, and he blinked furiously as tears began to cloud his vision.
Oh no, he's crying!
Navi fluttered closer, bobbing curiously around him.
It'll be okay, little boy. Don't worry.
Link couldn't decide if his heart would break from happiness or sadness first. He had told himself that seeing her again would make up for her not knowing who he was, but now he wasn't so sure. She was the same as ever, but she remembered nothing of their friendship. Had it been worth this heartache just to see her one more time? But no, he was being stupid. Of course it was worth it. Wiping his tears away, Link settled into a more comfortable sitting position. I would like to tell you a story, if you'll listen. The story of the hero of time. He told them everything when which he had first met the other Navi and set out on his quest to when he finally defeated Ganondorf and sealed him in the Dark Realm. The great Deku Tree listened patiently, as he always listened to what the children of the forest had to say. Link could tell that Navi had a lot of questions she wanted to ask, but it seemed she could tell that Link needed to get all of this out without interruption. He'd never been so grateful for her wisdom. His mouth was dry, and his voice was a little hoarse by the time he finished. He glanced up at the great Deku Tree, then returned his gaze to Navi, who hovered in front of him without saying anything. Even though he spent so much time with her that he could usually read her body language as easy as an expression, he couldn't figure out what her reaction to his story was. So I came here, he said softly, lowering his gaze to his hands as he miserably plucked a few blades of grass. I just wanted to see Navi again. The little fairy fluttered down and settled on his knee. Her tiny feet tickled the bare skin.
It's funny, she said slowly. I always felt like my destiny was to go do something important, something different from all the other fairies. Now I know what it was, but now my destiny's already been fulfilled. You'd think I wouldn't feel this longing.
The great Deku Tree drew out a long, thoughtful groan that seemed to stretch from his deep roots underground, the highest branches swaying far above them. There are some destinies the goddesses have woven into the fabric of time itself. Thy destiny is such a one, Link. Though it may seem thy work is done, thou shalt always have a hand in the fate of Hyrule. Thus it is with Princess Zelda, and with the sages, and with myself, and I do believe it is thus with Navi. She started up into the air with a tinkle, so loud it almost sounded like a clanging bell.
Me?
She cried, fluttering around agitatedly.
But I haven't done any of that stuff Link just talked about. That was another time dimension thingy. There's nothing for me to do this time around.
Nay, there was a sunny smile in the tree's voice. Some are destined to great deeds, like our hero of time. Others are destined to shape the events in the world by their wise counsel, or else by treachery. Still others, my good Navi, are graced with the destiny of companionship. Navi had calmed down a little, but she was still flying in confused circles.
But how can that companionship be destiny? Everyone has friends. There's nothing special about that.
Holding the fate of the world in one's hands is a lonely enterprise, the great Deku Tree said sadly. If thou could but look as far back in the annals of time as I, thou would see a long line of those who held the threads of destiny in their hands, yet knew naught of love. Many evil deeds could have been averted, had there only been one true companion for these individuals. For the first time, Link wondered if Ganondorf had ever been lonely. Growing up as the only Gerudo boy, raised by two completely cracked and evil witches, who told him night and day that he deserved to rule the world with an iron fist. Would he still have turned out the way he had if he had a friend who never hesitated to help or call him out when he was being stupid or selfish? Breaking into his thoughts, Navi fluttered right up to his nose, so that all he could see was her blue glow and her swiftly beating wings. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then she quietly asked,
Are you lonely?
A minute ago, he would have said yes, but now he just smiled and said, Not anymore. She gently tweaked his nose.
Then I think I found my destiny.